Good evening, and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are well into our 29th year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished in the past, what they're planning for the future. It's a wider net than that, though. We have had on other brands of artists. We have had on sculptors, painters, singers, musicians, actors, all sorts of talented people. So if you have an idea for a guest who might be good for the Writer's Block, writer or other brand of talented person, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd be very happy to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming that comes out of 1623 Studios for and about K-Band is a result of cable access television. That's cable access television. You don't get this wonderful social service by and about K-Band if you subscribe to Dish. Don't be tempted. You stick with cable. Tonight, I'm happy to say we do have a writer-editor by the name of David Olson. His name may be familiar to you because he is now the editor of the Gloucester Daily Times. David was born in New Hampshire, where he went to Kennett High School up in the White Mountains, and later moved south to attend UNH, where he was from the beginning a journalism and English major. He's been, and this is rare in today's America, he's been with the Gloucester Daily Times and other newspapers in that corporate circuit since getting out of UNH. He became an intern at Gloucester Daily Times. After that internship was up, they had an opening, so he stayed at the Gloucester Daily Times, and kind of compressing a little time there, he is now at the Gloucester Daily Times again as editor, and simultaneously the editor of the Salem News. David Olson, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Thank you for having me. It's great job security when you have like two jobs. You know, you do two jobs and they can't let you go.
They have to fire you twice.
Twice the paperwork.
Do you have to run back? This is a jump question. Do you have to run back and forth constantly, or can you handle everything electronically?
I can usually handle stuff from one place or another, but it's an easy zip down 128. If you have to travel between two places, that's probably the easiest of the two between Gloucester and Beverly.
Where's your favorite den?
Oh, Gloucester.
Gloucester.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Especially in the summer.
Because you live in Gloucester.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's definitely the best.
And we're on Gloucester television.
That's right. When I'm in Beverly, I'll tell them Beverly.
I always ask writers where they got the idea that they wanted to write. Did that come from early teachers or your family, or?
I remember I really loved to read as a young kid, and my mother got me a library card when I was 4, and you really kind of get into 4. I can't remember how much I actually remember. I wasn't a precocious reader, but really kind of falling in love with words at a very young age, and loving to tell stories, and also kind of being really interested, I think, in the world around me. And kind of wanting to tell stories about what I saw, and I think that's where the kind of spark for journalism came, because it kind of combined my natural nosiness with writing, with the craft and pain of writing.
So a library card at 4, and then your mother encouraged you?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Did she read to you?
Yeah. My mother and my father both read to me, and we did. I think our son got his library card at 4, so it's a kind of a family habit. I've
interviewed a lot of people who got into journalism, but were not journalism majors. They kind of drifted into the history majors. But you were...
Yep, I went to school. I knew, from my first, when I was a freshman in high school, I knew what I wanted to do. I'm one of those people who's kind of known...
Were you on the high school newspaper?
Yeah, I was the editor of our high school newspaper, and for 4 years, and when I went to UNH, I was the editor.
What's the name of the paper? The Kennett.
It was the paper. We couldn't really come up. There wasn't a paper there, and we had to kind of come up with our own. So we started our own paper, and it came out once a month.
And what's it called?
It was the paper.
The paper.
The paper. Yeah. We were good. We could write. We just couldn't come up with good names for.
I think John Christie, a previous guest, mentioned to me that the New Hampshire newspaper is The New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, yeah.
I bet they spent a lot of consultant money.
And I was
on
editor
that
there
before
too. So yeah,
you were.
Yep. Yeah.
So you were reporting all through. Did you have a grade school newspaper?
No. So we moved around too much.
So you were an editor and reporter
Yep.
in high school and college.
Yep.
Do you miss, as an editor now, the writing?
Yes. We have a group. We have a group, an editorial board, and we share writing editorials. So I get a chance to write editorials, but the idea, I don't get to go out and interview 3 or 4 or 5 people about a certain issue or a certain story and sit down and spend some time writing a story that way as much as I used to, and I do miss.
Do you ever do that occasionally?
Occasionally.
I like that. I want to. I knew that guy in New York years ago, and I want to talk to him.
Right. Yeah. Every once in a while, I get a chance to do that, and it's a lot of fun. And sometimes I'll write for. We have magazines, and I can spend some time and write something for the magazine, or if there's something happening and there's not a reporter around, you go out and you cover the fire, you cover the council meeting, and it's good. It's I say it's good. It's kind of fun to feel that pain of trying to write clearly and concisely. Always in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, well, I tell my reporters, don't use this word, this word, this word, and this word, and I have to make sure that I don't somehow let them slip into my copy because I know they'll find it.
Yeah, they slip in. They slip in. You've heard the word 20,000 times at least.
Right.
So it's right there knocking on your door all the time.
Yeah, but I do miss the writing quite a bit.
So that hasn't gone away. Your passion from grade school and high school and college is still there.
And I try and soothe that some with the editorials because you get a chance to really, hopefully, if you have the time to really kind of craft sentences and put together coherent thoughts.
I like that old line. I would have made it shorter, but I didn't have the time.
That's absolutely
true.
Rule.
People that don't get that shouldn't be writing.
And the thing with a newspaper, at least in the print edition, is like an editorial has a certain amount of space. It might be 20 inches, and you might write something that's 18 inches. Like, do I write 2 more inches and make it flabbier? Or you might be 23 inches and you think you're cutting it down. You're like, okay, I cut it, and then all of a sudden you realize you made it 2 inches longer somehow by rearranging your thoughts. And there's that space challenge in certain parts of newspaper writing.
It's interesting what you need and what you don't need.
Right, exactly.
I look at things. I think I want to. Sometimes I'll cut something just because it's going over one page.
Right.
Wonderful,
exactly,
wonderful.
Exactly.
And you can cut it and say, "Oh God, that was all fluff. That crap."
Right. Exactly. Like I'll write when I write an editorial. I'll write. I won't write in our do the first draft in our company computer program. I'll do it in a Word document or something like that. So I'm just writing down what I think what everything that has to be in there. And you're not thinking about how long it is or how short it is. You write, this is everything that people need to know, and this is the best. And then you kind of put it in the system and see how it, if it's too long or too short. And I'm at the point now where you kind of know how much space you have in the back of your head to get something down.
Yeah, without cutting and pasting physically.
Right.
Tell me what an editor's day is like. Tell us what an editor's day is like.
Usually starts pretty early.
And that's what's early?
Well, I'll be at the breakfast. I'll be at home at the breakfast table, looking at emails, and you check. Nowadays, you check and make sure that all the stories made it online.
So you're on 6 in the morning.
Yeah, 6, 7 in the morning. It's like and then I might work on an editorial from home for an hour or so. So I get it's quiet time when you can really get something outlined, and then. I'm in the office by 9:30. Reporters start rolling in around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and we have a meeting.
Every meeting, every day. There's
especially in Salem where there are more reporters because it's a bigger paper. We'll all kind of gather around the table for I'd say about 10 minutes. Everybody kind of talks about what they're working on that day, and we might also brainstorm ideas for Thanksgiving coverage, or we might talk about something that's happening nationally, and is there a way is there a local angle to that we should chase down? Or we might talk about really good stories that someone wrote and kind of go over what made that story work really well. And then after that, the reporters are going out and doing their reporting, and they'll file a couple times throughout the day. And then there's some administrative stuff, but I'll work on the editorials again, or I put together the editorial page for both papers, and we try and have local copy, at least some local copy, every day in both papers. So I'm working on those, and that's helping people who send in letters to the editor, and working with columnists and stuff like that. And
the stuff that people go for, the goings on and old bits,
all that stuff too, and kind of coordinating that. And we also have two really good sports departments. So those guys start coming in around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and they're talking about what they have going on, and we're trying to make sure that the games that need photographers have photographers there, and sometimes they'll spend half a day working with a photographer on a project, and it's a little bit different every day, which I think is one of the things I love about it. And then around 3:30, I would say around 3:30, 4 o'clock, the stories are supposed to come rolling in.
When's your deadline?
4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Sometimes, so you get a few before deadline, and then,
How long can you hold?
Not that long. I mean, for print, Gloucester, we have 4. Our newspaper group has 4 daily papers, and we have Gloucester, the New Report, Daily News, the Salem News, the Eagle Tribune of North Andover, and we also print the Nashua Telegraph. They're a client of ours, so
I didn't know
they all go off one press. So we are pretty. Those guys are rolling.
Where's the press?
It's in North Andover. It's a beautiful.
Is there a press in Beverly anymore?
There used to be.
Is that there?
No. That press was disassembled about 10 years ago and sold to a newspaper in Colombia, in South America, and it's still in use there. Every once in a while, they'll send a picture to our old press guy of the printer being used, but we didn't need two printers.
That was a fairly impressive
it was
operation.
That's another thing I miss, is kind of like the building used to shake a little bit when the press would start.
I remember I've been there a few times.
And you could smell the ink. You could kind of smell the ink.
Newsprint.
We don't have that anymore. But so like around 4, reporters will start filing stories, and I have a managing editor in Gloucester, Andrea Holbrook, and I have a couple of editors in Salem, and we'll kind of divide editing the stories so that people hopefully aren't feeling rushed.
So these are people you can rely on to chop a sloppy lead,
or just
get the facts. And
exactly. I mean, some stories are more challenging than others. I think our writers are pretty conscientious and hardworking, but there are some who are young who might need a little bit more help focusing and stuff.
So you said there's more reporters in
Salem.
In Salem. So you have to be in Salem every day?
It depends. Some weeks I'm in there like 4 days a week, or some weeks I'm in there 5 days a week. It's so much has changed. It's pretty easy to communicate back and forth by phone and computer, so I can be in Salem and still do a lot of Gloucester.
This isn't something you could do 20 years ago.
No. So it's and again, it's easy to shuttle back and forth. And last week I was in Gloucester for 2 days in a row, and it also gives you a chance to talk to reporters firsthand. And so.
And the Salem News is right on the highway.
It's right on the highway. Yeah, it's
easy access.
As I say, it's 3 songs on the radio from Beverly to the Gloucester office. So that's how.
That's all.
Yeah.
Always observing the speed limit.
That's right. In case anybody's watching, yeah.
So, for reporters out, I want to get a finer line on this. When does a story absolutely have to be in? Is it like 5 o'clock? If it doesn't get there by 5, we're not going to.
It depends on what kind of story it is. If it's a feature story, if you're writing about, the garden club, that story should be in by 4, 5 o'clock. There's no reason it's not. If it's a council meeting, we can go until 9, but we can only hold space for like one story. It goes really late.
It gets shorter.
Right.
So you still have a hole.
Right,
you
exactly.
Still use the term?
That's exactly it. We have a hole on page 1, and if that story's got to be in by 9, and we edit it and put it in, and we can make deadline that way. But everything else has to be done.
If it's not in, you've got that hole there. You expand the weather.
That's right.
Or the tide
goings on
tide chart. Yeah.
But we usually will have a backup in case. Now we've learned to kind of have a plan, because we usually have. We try and run 5 stories on the front page every day, and we might have 7 stories to choose from that day. So it might be a case where, all right, the council's meeting, and we hope this story is going to be in by 9. If for some reason, if there's a disaster and it's not, or if the council doesn't take up the issue that we think we are, we always try and have a strong story in reserve to slide into that spot. And if the council goes late, we can always write a story for the web so people know what's happening, first thing in the morning the next day.
That's a good place I want to move to, the web stuff. Sure. How involved are you with the web production? I know the material's going to be the same, the story's going to be the same, but is there another set of people sitting in, I don't know where they're sitting.
I wish there were. It's we're all kind of back trained on the web stuff. We have a few people who specialize in that, and they are based in North Andover, but they don't do content type stuff. And then we have a digital editor, John Castelluccio, who lives in Gloucester and handles stuff for both Salem and Gloucester. So it might be, making sure that everything's on the web when it should be, and making sure that the headlines are right, and if there's breaking news during the day, making sure that gets posted. But we all know how to do that. But
it's still a combination between the IT people and the print people.
Yeah.
It's not IT God on a mountaintop.
And I think that's true in general. I think now more journalists, especially young journalists, have a wider set of skills in those areas than used to. I had to learn a lot of it. I would say I'm probably at that generation where you're able to acquire some of that knowledge. But we have some of the older reporters, sometimes where it took them longer to
when you were just starting out, either in high school or at UNH or maybe Gloucester Times, did you work with paper?
Yeah, we had the type, and you'd have the mimeograph paper. You'd have the double paper. You type it and you pull it out, and then you give it to a typesetter.
Yeah.
And the typesetter would type it in, and then they would print it out. And there was the wax machine. You'd feed it through the wax machine, and the backside would have all wax, and you'd put it on the. And
the cut and paste was real then.
Yeah, and they'd take a picture of it.
My memory about when this stuff came in or disappeared is fuzzy. When I was a kid, I worked at a printing office, or still a lead type.
Yeah.
There's a lot of. If you walk too close, you get your arm burned.
You get that wax all over your hands, and then throughout the night, you'd be putting your hand, you'd be doing this, and you get home, and you realize you had the alfalfa towel. That's probably why. Probably why I'm bald. It's probably an occupational hazard.
What is the readership of the print Gloucester Times, for instance, compared to the online subscription?
Sure. We have about 10,000 readers. The print subscription, 10,000 readers.
10,000 subscriptions to the paper.
Yep. And then
that's awfully good.
It is. We're holding pretty well. I think Gloucester, the Cape Ann area has a they've seemed to want print more than some of the other places. And then our digital subscription, it's tough to. We have people who subscribe just to the online edition, and there are another 2,000 of those.
Do you get an online? Does that come with the print?
Yep, you get
I know we subscribe, but I never look online.
You can get it online. You get access to all the stories through the website, but then you also get the e-edition of the paper, so you can click on it and see how the paper would look if it were in print. So you can read it that way too. We get I don't want to say random users, but we get people who will during when Fiesta season and it's greasy pole time.
Then
our
busy,
traffic
spikes
during big storms. Our traffic spikes when Wicked Tuna is on air. our traffic spikes. You can kind of in Salem Halloween, we for that night we are the most of all of our 120 papers in our chain. We're by far the most
mention the corporate name.
Sure, it's CNHI, Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated,
and it's out of
Montgomery, Alabama,
Mississippi, Alabama.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was that many papers.
Yeah, it's a lot of we're one of the bigger groups. Our newspaper group is we used to be owned by Ottaway,
right,
and they but a lot of the other papers they own are like smaller papers in Oklahoma and Georgia and places like that, like 5,000 circulation papers.
Does corporate ever try to influence?
Nope.
Anything?
No, which has been interesting because, and I think it's good because if you think of what the political climate is in Oklahoma or Texas, and compare it to Cape Ann, they're a little bit different. If you tried to have a one-size-fits-all political journalistic philosophy,
they're aware.
Yeah, and even our group, the Merrimack Valley is a much more conservative part of Massachusetts than Cape Ann or Salem. So we try and just play it straight.
The subject of IT and online subscriptions let me go into a big, not quite closing question, but almost. Where are newspapers going to be in 2030, let alone past 2030, but say 11 years from now?
I think there are, the way I see it and the way I think might be the best model is, I think, like a strong community newspaper like a Gloucester Times or a Salem News. It might be, digital, all around the clock, but then on Thursday or Friday you have a single edition, a print edition that kind of almost works like a weekly, but there's more reporting in there. Maybe that's where you put your investigative work on that day. So you're kind of giving the people who want the news, 24/7 all around the clock, you're giving them.
So the physical paper would be
once a week, right?
Weekly,
right? Almost like the week in review that the Times does or something like that. I think it's going to change depending on. I think part of it, we're not going to know because we're not 100% sure how the news consumption habits of, the kids who are my son's age, 24, 25, are going to change because he consumes news. He's totally up on the news, but he'll read one Gloucester Times story here. He'll read something from the New York Times. He'll read something from ProPublica, and it's all very random, and it's trying to figure out how to tap into that.
I got some newspapers machines at North Shore years ago. A Globe machine, a Herald machine, and I think a Salem machine maybe. And we had to take them out in about 6 months. They just weren't selling anything.
Yeah.
I would assign it sometime,
right.
But it wasn't enough to keep the machines going.
I read the Globe. I read the Globe every day. I've been since I was a kid. But I read it online. I don't read it. I don't read the print edition. You get everything you get in the print edition, but my habits have changed.
Yeah.
To that point, and I subscribe to the New York Times and the Washington Post too. But I don't necessarily read those back to back.
Yeah. I'm still trapped in the ancient analog century where most of me existed. I still love the.
Well, that's fun when you travel. Like when you travel someplace and you go to Atlanta or someplace, and I like to get the print edition of the papers there, so you can kind of get an idea of what the print edition still gives you an idea of what that organization thinks is important.
Yes,
that's how they organize.
Right.
So that's always fun.
Now, the old print newspapers are being assailed by the electronic or IT onslaught, and we're almost out of time. But the media itself, journalism itself, is suffering from, let's say, political waves.
Yes.
Will it survive?
Absolutely. I think it's happened before. And I think the flip side, and we've seen it, of kind of this, I want to say fake news, but just kind of like this sneering attitude towards journalism, is there have been people who have called us who said we've subscribed to the paper because we think journalism is important. I think there are people who really, in all of these communities, who have rallied around journalism and say, no, that's not acceptable. And you know, people who may disagree with us, but they understand that the First Amendment means something, and
the free press is working
right
now. As much as it's derided from certain corners,
right. Well, the New York Times, their subscription rates have gone. They're doing better than ever. I mean, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So you're hopeful.
I'm hopeful. I think it'll, like you said, I mean, in 2030, it'll look totally different than it is now. But I think the basic idea of people going out, finding what's important, finding the truth, and then turning around and telling their neighbors about it, that's still going to exist.
Yeah, and there is truth.
Right.
It's not something you can fudge all the time. We're almost out of time. David Olson, I want to thank you for being on the Writer's Block.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing some of the adventures you've had and some of the processes of editing here and in Salem.
Great.
In 2030, we'll have you back to talk about what's going on. I want to thank you in television land for being with us too. If you've learned something from David Olson about what editing is and the importance of journalism and how, with his background, someone might get into journalism, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.